Have you ever felt like you are working harder than everyone around you, yet somehow you are still falling behind? You wake up earlier, stay later, push yourself further, and sacrifice more, but the results never seem to match the effort. You watch others move ahead with what looks like half your struggle, and deep down you wonder if something is wrong with you. If you have ever felt exhausted, burnt out, and quietly frustrated, this story is for you. Because once there was a farmer who believed hard work was everything, and that belief almost cost him his life. Stay with this story until the end. In a quiet farming valley, where generations had lived by the rhythm of the land, there lived a 34-year-old farmer named Daniel. He owned a modest 12-acre farm that once belonged to his father. Daniel believed in one principle above all else: work harder than everyone, and success will come. Every morning, long before the sky began to lighten, Daniel rose from bed. He stepped into the cold air while the world was still asleep and walked straight to his fields. He refused to spend money on modern tools, convinced that struggle built character. His father had farmed this way. His grandfather had farmed this way. To Daniel, ease felt dishonest. He planted every seed by hand. He watered every row using buckets carried from a distant well. He pulled every weed himself, bending until his back screamed. From sunrise to sunset, Daniel worked without pause. His hands were cracked and bleeding. His shoulders burned constantly. At night, he collapsed into bed, too tired to eat properly, too tired to speak, too tired to notice how quiet his home had become. His wife, Anna, often watched him with worried eyes. She would say softly, "Daniel, this pace is breaking you. There must be another way." Daniel would shake his head. "Success demands sacrifice," he replied. "Hard work never fails. I just need to give more." The other farmers in the valley admired him from a distance. "That man works like 3 people," they would say. "If effort alone made wealth, he would be the richest among us." But behind the praise was pity. Despite his endless labor, Daniel's farm barely survived. Each harvest brought just enough to get by. His crops were average, his yields were modest, and worst of all, his life outside the fields was disappearing. Next to Daniel's land lived another farmer named Samuel. Samuel was close in age and owned a farm nearly the same size. He had started with fewer resources than Daniel, yet his fields were always greener, fuller, and more productive. Samuel worked from mid-morning until early afternoon. He used efficient irrigation, hired help during busy weeks, and spent evenings reading, resting, or walking with his family. Somehow, his farm produced nearly twice as much as Daniel's. This difference haunted Daniel every night as he lay awake, muscles aching, mind restless. One scorching summer, a drought struck the valley. Water became precious. Every farmer faced the same challenge: how to keep crops alive with limited resources. Daniel responded the only way he knew how. He worked even harder. He began rising earlier, carrying water bucket after bucket from the well, making dozens of trips each day. His body protested, but he ignored it. "Hard work never fails," he repeated like a prayer. Meanwhile, Samuel adjusted his irrigation system to release water during cooler hours, reducing waste and protecting his crops with minimal effort. After 2 relentless weeks, something inside Daniel finally gave way. While carrying another heavy bucket, his vision blurred, his legs trembled. The bucket slipped from his hands, spilling water into the dry soil. Daniel collapsed between the rows of crops, gasping for breath. Anna found him there, unable to stand, his body completely drained. The doctor's words were blunt. "Your body is shutting down," he said. "You are exhausted, dehydrated, and dangerously close to a heart failure. If you continue like this, you will not reach the next harvest. Not because of the drought, but because you will not survive." That night, lying in bed with fluids dripping into his arm, Daniel stared at the ceiling. For the first time in his life, he felt defeat. Not defeat from the weather or the land, but defeat from the realization that everything he believed might be wrong. "I did everything right," he whispered to Anna. "I worked harder than anyone. I sacrificed everything. Why am I failing?" Anna held his hand and replied gently, "Maybe effort is not the lesson you are missing. Maybe it is something else." That thought stayed with Daniel through the long, silent night. A few days later, when he was strong enough to walk, Daniel did something his pride had prevented for years. He went to Samuel's home and knocked on the door. Samuel welcomed him warmly. They sat on the porch, overlooking Samuel's thriving fields. Daniel looked at the healthy crops and felt both envy and curiosity. "I need to understand," Daniel said quietly. "I work twice as long as you. I give everything I have. Yet you produce more with less effort." How Samuel stood and led him to a small shed. Inside, he picked up 2 axes, one old and dull, the other sharp and shining. "Imagine 2 people cutting trees," Samuel said. He handed Daniel the dull axe and pointed to a thick log. Daniel swung. The axe barely cut the wood. He swung again and again, breathing harder each time, making little progress. Then Samuel took the sharp axe and swung just a few times. The log split cleanly. "The first cutter works without stopping," Samuel said. "The second stops to sharpen his tool. By the end of the day, the second does twice the work." Samuel looked at Daniel and said, "You have been swinging a dull axe for years." He then showed Daniel his farm and explained 3 principles. First, systems over effort. His irrigation worked automatically, while Daniel spent hours carrying water. Second, focus over hustle. Samuel grew only to crops that thrived in the soil, while Daniel spread himself thin across many. Third, rest as strategy. Samuel slept well, stayed healthy, and made better decisions. "You are not failing because you lack effort," Samuel said. "You are failing because effort is all you know. Hard work without strategy is suffering." Daniel returned home with something he had not felt in years: hope. Instead of rushing to the fields the next morning, he sat down with Anna and a notebook. He worked fewer hours, but spent time learning, planning, and thinking. He researched irrigation, sold unused equipment, and invested in efficient systems. He reduced his crops to the ones that mattered most. He hired help when needed. Slowly, everything changed. 6 months later, the next harvest arrived. Daniel's farm produced more than ever before. Not because he worked harder, but because every hour mattered. He worked fewer hours, felt healthier, and lived again. Samuel visited and smiled. "You sharpened your axe," he said. Daniel learned a truth worth remembering. Strategy beats exhaustion every single time. Strategy beats exhaustion every single time. If this story touched you, like, share, and subscribe for more stories that help you work smarter, not just harder.